What up, Green Gang? Welcome back to the Amendment of the Week. And in this week's episode, we're going to be talking about alfalfa. But before we get into that, let's check out Mediro awesome sale that they have going on right now. They have a sale of 6% maximum yield sale, which brings their Smart 8 down to $589. And then if you use code GG510, that brings it down even more to around $530, which is like the cheapest I've ever seen a decent, well-built LED light that's powerful go for. So if you guys are looking for a good production light or even a good veg tent light, they've recently come out with the Mini Sun 2, which will also flower in a 2x3. But if you're looking for a more production light or even a little bit of a smaller light, make sure you check out Vegetative Growth and use code GG510. Now let's get on to alfalfa meal. Sometimes it's called the kelp of the land because it bioaccumulates much of the same kind of nutrients that kelp does, but a little bit different. Kelp does have the whole periodic table inside of it, and alfalfa meal has most of it. So, much like kelp, alfalfa has natural plant growth hormones, amino acids, trace minerals, and a good NPK ratio. The NPK ratio is a little bit low, but we'll get into that later on. Growing alfalfa is great for many reasons. It's a great food source for animals and people. Alfalfa sprouts are great for microgreens if you are into microgreens. Alfalfa is a perennial that's closely resembles to clover. So if you see it out in the wild, it may look like a clover plant, but alfalfa grows between 1 and 3 feet and is native to warmer, more temperate climates. We as a people have been using alfalfa for a long time, since the Greek and Roman eras, for thousands of years. Alfalfa is also a great cover crop for planting in between your other production crops to help keep your soil alive and keep pumping plant exudates into the soil and allowing the mycorrhizal fungi and the soil to plant relationship to continue without your main production crop there. It also is great for feeding local wildlife like rabbits, which those are also great to keep on the farm for cold manure if you want to have a cold manure on your farm. Also, alfalfa meal is great when you're using it as a cover crop because if you let some of it flower out, it will also feed pollinators and help bees and other pollinators flourish. Using alfalfa as a cover crop also helps immensely because alfalfa is a nitrogen fixing crop, which means that it uses the bacteria rhizobium and it creates little nodules on its roots and it pulls nitrogen from the air and fixing it into your soil. So if you're having compaction and nitrogen issues in a certain soil in your area, planting alfalfa cover crop may help out quite considerably. It'll even bring down your fertilizer costs quite a bit by fixing some of that nitrogen into your soil. And then afterwards, when you plan to terminate the crop or cut down the cover crop, you can bale that up for storage for grazing animals over the winter, or you can use that as mulch to protect your soil throughout the winter, having a decent layer of mulch and having that temperature protection layer over your soil will keep those microbes alive and happy throughout winter. And we can't forget, mixing in the actual, alfalfa meal into our soils for creating a decent amendment / soil for vegetative growth. Alfalfa contains a natural plant growth hormone called tricantanol. Sorry about that. And tricantanol is really great for early vegetative growth. It likes to promote roots and shoots and vegetative growth. So I like using it up until like a week or 2 weeks into flower. I may not top dress with kelp meal or use a kelp tea much past that, because I don't want to promote any more leafy growth than I already got at that point. So it's extremely great natural fertilizer for vegetative growth up until the transitioning period for your plants. Like I was saying, alfalfa is grown in large fields because it's great for animal feed, especially goats and other grazing type animals. And it's baled up in these large round bales. Sometimes it's baled up in square bales so that it can be stored in a barn for long-term storage for those grazing animals. And then a lot of times, once the alfalfa hay starts breaking down too much to where the animals no longer will use it and it's no longer good for them, it's still really great for our soils because it has a lot of the fungi and bacteria that started breaking down that alfalfa hay already. So we can use that and help supplement our soils, use it as a mulch that it will eventually break down and supplement our soils. You can also get a lot of alfalfa hay relatively cheap from larger farmers because if it has gone bad for their use, they are usually just trying to get rid of it and it's a waste stream. But you do want to check with the farmer if they have been spraying unwanted things, pesticides, herbicides, and whatnot on their alfalfa before you use it in any of your composts or soil. What does alfalfa contain? Well, like I was saying earlier, it contains a lot of what kelp contains. It contains a rich source of proteins, minerals, vitamins, amino acids, and natural plant growth hormones. Like we were discussing, the most studied one is the tricantanol, which is a natural plant growth hormone, which has been studied for production in opium poppy fields and other cash crop related crops. Alfalfa also contains a bunch of trace minerals. Now, how do you use alfalfa in the garden? That's actually pretty simple. You can use it as a compost activator or accelerator just by mixing some of the high nitrogen content alfalfa into your browns, into your carbons, and it will help promote the activity of a thermophilic compost, making it a little bit faster. You can use it as a top dress by directly top dressing it on your soil or by directly mixing it into your soil blend when mixing up a new batch of soil per se. You can use it in compost teas. Now you want to be careful when using it in compost teas. You use it like a quarter cup or less per 5-gallon batch of tea because the nitrogen content and the natural plant growth hormones are quite powerful, especially for a compost tea when you're especially for a compost tea when you're multiplying all the organisms in the compost. It's going to break down the nitrogen and the other constituents of the alfalfa much quicker, therefore giving it to your plant all at once. So you want to be careful with the alfalfa in the compost teas. You can mix it into some compost beforehand and let that compost a little and use that as a top dress. You can also use it as a seed sprout tea by sprouting some of the seeds and then emulsifying them in water and using that as an enzyme tea. That's really great. It contains lots of natural enzymes and growth hormones. Or you can ferment it. You can ferment it by itself, or you can ferment it with other plants like comfrey and nettles to make a more balanced plant tonic. And that ferment will be shelf stable and last you quite a while. So there's quite a few ways that you can use alfalfa in the garden. But more often than not, a lot of us are just using it as a top dress, or it's included in a lot of our dry amendment blends that we use. Thanks for checking out the video on alfalfa. I hope you guys learned a little something. Make sure to join me and Lantern over on Twitch. We like to stream some games over there, answer any questions about plants, and we'll see you on the next one.